My name is Sekibakiba Peter Lekgoathi. I'm a historian based at Wits University. I'm associate professor and I teach American history, African history. I do research on various topics including South African history, particularly the history of the liberation struggle, popular struggles on the ground, both in towns and in the rural areas. I do a lot of work on the politics of knowledge production. I do work on ethnicity. As you know, ethnicity is a problem in our country. It was a problem in the past. Most importantly, I do work on the history of Ndebele ethnicity, how the Ndebele were made. And finally, I look at the history of radio, both African language radio stations of the SABC, as well as the way that radio was actually employed by the liberation movement. In particular, I look at the history of Radio Freedom, which was the ANC's underground radio station. I grew up in the countryside, in Limpopo. During the time of the Bantustans, the homelands, I grew up in Leboa, a place called Leboa. And what I was told as a child was that we were moved to this particular village. A year after I was born, we were moved from a white farm where my parents, actually my grandparents worked and lived. And because the farmer did not want them anymore, he simply chased them away. And that's how we ended up going back into the homeland. So just there and there, you can actually see the impact of apartheid. Yes, our country still faces major challenges, and maybe certain things could be done better than they're actually being done. But you look around you, you can see that South Africa is no longer the same. Look, I'll just speak about two things. You look at how the lives, particularly the lives of rural people, have been affected by this transformation. There's been a rollout of electricity and water services to rural communities, things that rural people struggled with in the past. That's a major achievement. That's a major achievement. There's been also a rollout of social grants for the elderly people, for young people, for people with disabilities and so forth. For black people, these are things that they were excluded from in the past, or even if some of them got it, they didn't get the same sort of services as white people. So, fundamentally, we do not have apartheid in South Africa anymore. So race does not determine, your status. But in effect, as you all know, it remains a challenge because townships continue to be places where black people live, and suburbs continue to be overwhelmingly areas for white people, even though there has been a movement of some middle-class black people from the townships to the suburbs. Historical consciousness is very important because if you don't have a sense of where you are coming from, you will not be able to understand who you are. It's really about your identity. Where did you come to be where you are right now? And so if you don't have a sense, if you don't have an understanding of who you are, how could you possibly be able to, think about the possibilities in future? So there's a connection between the past, the present, and the future. So, a person who doesn't know his or her past is like a plant that does not have roots. It withers. That plant withers and dies. So in a sense, history is very important if we are going to have a socially cohesive society, a society that has a sense that values the struggles that this country has gone through, a society that values the importance of human rights because of the human rights abuses that happened in the past. That's very, very important. And it really doesn't matter whether, you know, a learner is going to be or is planning to be an astronaut or a medical doctor or, you know, or whatever. You know, history is very important because it teaches you, you know, the basic values of life, about how things have actually come to be how they are today. Why is it that we have, you know, the majority of black people in this country living in poverty? You know, that can be explained historically. If you do not have any historical sense, you are just going to provide simplistic explanations of it. I'd like for South Africa to be a more just society, a society that is compassionate, a society that cares, a society that really knows its past, right? A society that, I mean, you know, a couple of years ago we had challenges, for example, about how South Africans feel about particularly people from other parts of the continent. And it's in part, that is in part informed by this lack of historical sense. But most of this continent, the role that it played in bringing about the end of apartheid, maybe, you know, people would not have behaved in the way that they did.